You're listening to you're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV and listen to books and listen to other podcasts, and most of which are not about New Jersey.
Shocking and sad.
But it's the end of the year.
It is. It is.
And we're podcast hosts.
Yes. I'm Jodie.
I'm Andrea.
And we are following in a long-standing tradition of other podcasts where we do a best-of episode in the week between Christmas and New Year's so that we don't have to prep as much. And also just because it's kind of fun to look back on the year and see what we watched, what we loved. Make some recommendations.
Yeah, and especially because we are a show that focuses primarily on movies and TV, but we are a liker of things. And I think what I do like about our show, it seems, is that we have I've gathered a lot in common with our listeners, which I think is typical, obviously, for podcasts, but maybe more so for ours. And so I have a feeling that, we don't often talk about what we're watching and consuming other than what we've covered for the week. And I think this might be fun. And I would love to know what our listeners loved this year too. So hopefully this will start that conversation too.
I mean, some people hate like lists, end of year lists. I personally love them because I'm I feel like my head is in the sand half the time throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, I'm like, okay, now I have a list of things that people I trust have recommended that I can kind of like dive into when I have downtime.
Yeah. And it will get me through the weird in between of December, January, where my other podcasts that I listen to are all on break.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've already started doing it. Like I am the person that needs this. Like I started, I listened to, we were saying this off mic before we started, but one of the podcasts that I listen to regularly is Good One with Jesse David Fox, and they do a year-end best 10 comedy specials. And if you hadn't guessed by the fact that Andrea and I met through a stand-up comedian, we're both interested in stand-up and watch a lot of comedy in general. And so there were a few on there that I'd been meaning to watch and hadn't yet. And so in my downtime while wrapping presents the last couple of days, I caught up on a couple that I will mention that I enjoyed very much.
So I will say this isn't a top list. We didn't put these in any order. It's also not like a, what's the word? It's not like I think you're going to mostly cover movies and TV. I've got a bunch of other stuff. I've got some movies and TV too that I'll share.
Yeah. We both have podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is like more of like a grab bag of things to check out, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're looking for things to check out.
Yeah. Our full-time jobs are not to be cultural critics. Like we're not claiming endless knowledge of the landscape of entertainment.
Exactly.
We're saying these are the things that we found that we loved. So yeah, let's start with TV. So the 5 that I like love and can't wait to come back. We're going to leave Yellowjackets out of this because this is like obvious. This was the last season of Succession, which you haven't watched any of, right?
No. I'm going to stress people out with how little TV I watched this year.
Yeah, it's okay. I made up for it. So this was the last season of Succession. It is an excellent show. It is a show that I looked forward to watching. It's not as emotional of a show as some of the other ones on my list. It's one of those that's like so well crafted, so well written, so well shot, like incredible acting. Like it's just everything is top tier in that show. And they ended it with a really, really, really strong season. So I think that one thing I'm always looking for when we've got this like downtime before new stuff comes in is like, what's a show that I haven't seen that I've been meaning to watch that I could binge that's like going to keep me going for a while? And Succession is, I think, was 4 or 5 seasons total. For those who don't know, it's sort of a Murdoch family allegory of like, the patriarch of the family and like, is he going to step down? Is he going to lose it? Is he going to die? All this stuff. And who's going to take over the company, which sounds like nothing I would ever want to watch, but the acting is just incredible. Mm-hmm. This is going to be, I mean, they're just going to be standing, accepting awards for most of 2024. So highly recommend.
So you might as well get on board now.
You might as well.
I'm a fan of so many people on that show.
Yeah, Sarah Snook is great on it. I mean, I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know. Succession is a very well-regarded show, but it is on my top 5. And it, for somebody who, the last thing that I really want to watch is rich people.
Right.
Like, it's not in my DNA to like want to watch shows about rich people. I really liked it. It's
also good to know, like, there's been a lot of, it seems like, really good TV lately. And so if you're someone like me where it's like, I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, I think I don't make New Year's resolutions, so this isn't real. But like, I think I'm going to make it a point to watch more television this year. And it's like, where do you start when there has been so much good stuff? So to hear like a different take on a show from someone who, because like Succession, it is a show that I think I probably would love, but isn't something that would jump out to me right away. But then to hear from someone like you, who, like you said, it's not your typical thing either.
No,
like that bumps it up my list for sure.
But I think what it is like, I mean, there were many parts during many of the early seasons where I was like, why am I watching this? These people are awful. Like, and I'm not a person. I didn't even, I'm going to discredit myself by saying this. I liked Seinfeld fine. I am not a Seinfeld freak. Like it's everybody sucks in that show. And like everybody sucks in Succession too, but the writing is so fucking good that like, as just somebody who appreciates the craft of television, like it's just so well done. And that said, that's still in my 4 or 5 if I'm making like a top 5 list for the year. So if we're going, I'm going to do like kind of quickly through the 1 through 5. But so Succession would be in 4th or 5th. Also in 4th or 5th would be The Last of Us, which I have evangelized to you about, specifically episode 3.
It's so funny knowing you as a person at this point, like, and I know that Yellowjackets is the show that bonded us, but I also know that is also a kind of anomaly for you.
Yes.
But that that 2 of your top 5 are these 2 shows. It says a lot about the shows, I think.
I would not have put Last of Us there without the 3rd episode. I enjoyed the rest of it.
That's I almost said Scott Aukerman. What's his fucking name?
Nick Offerman.
So close.
It is close.
Maybe I'll leave that in.
Yeah. Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett.
Yeah.
As Bill and Frank. I think it's Bill. And yeah, it's like, it's sort of a bottle episode and sort of not, because it is connected to the rest of it. But I'm not a video game person. I was when I was a kid. I never got into like the more advanced video games that are out there now. And so I had no idea what Last of Us was. I just watched it because I was like looking for things to watch. There was like a dearth of content for a bit. Mm-hmm. But that 3rd episode, I'm not like an openly like weepy person most of the time. I fucking sobbed in my apartment alone. Just like, it was so beautiful. I feel like you could just watch that episode and it's like a little movie in and of itself. You don't actually need the full context. But I think that, Pedro Pascal is just a delightful human, and I feel like it's nice to support. And so is Bella Ramsey. And there's a lot of queer stuff in this. She's queer. Like, there's just a lot of cool stuff happening.
I know this isn't maybe how the people who make this show would prefer. But if you're someone like me who's on the fence about the show in general, if I went in and watched that episode first and really loved it, do you think then to go back and start at the beginning, like, how would my experience be?
This TV show is very bleak, right? It's like a fungus has taken over the world. Everybody, like, people are dead. Humans their worst instincts have come out. Like, there's just a lot of death and destruction, especially in the first couple of episodes. And And it's just, you're kind of in this like, oh my God, like, can I watch a whole series of all of this like horror? And then you get to Bill and Frank, and it's that much more impactful because of what you've just watched. So I think there is something that it benefits from watching the first 2 episodes. Plot-wise, you don't actually have to. But I do think that getting through 1 and 2 and like getting a sense of what's going on in the world around them, and then seeing how they lived and what's going on there. Yeah. I honestly, I mean, I already love Nick Offerman because he's just a delightful human. But like, I have never loved a person more than I love Nick Offerman after I watched his performance in this. It was just so beautiful.
I'm going to be so busy.
You are. And I want to hear about all of it. Okay. So that's Last of Us. So top 3, only one of these I know you've seen. I will say the other 2 I have repeatedly told you to watch. Actually, I've repeatedly told you to watch all of these except maybe Succession. So I would say the top 2 are kind of interchangeable. I love them about as much. The one that's just a hair below that is Somebody Somewhere.
I know. That's like number 1 on my list to watch for sure.
Oh my God. I mean, Bridget Everett, Jeff Hiller, Murray Hill. It's this like perfect combination of like sweet, but also kind of like real and harsh about life. Like the whole thing is her sister has died and she's moved back home. But the friendship between her and Jeff Hiller is so special in this. Also, the episodes are I think they're only a half hour. You can like get through this pretty quick.
I do like that.
Yeah, they're not overly drawn out. There is music and singing and queer joy and family relationships and some kind of rough parent mom stuff. Just a heads up.
Thank you
for those of us that
who
need
that
it.
heads up.
Yep. But it's not the focus. The focus is really the relationship between her and her sister, and then the relationship between her and Jeff Hiller's character. It's just a really beautiful portrait of friendship.
I do love a beautiful portrait of friendship. I'm
You
a real
do.
sucker for that, big time.
You do love a beautiful portrait of friendship. And Jeff Hiller, I knew who he was just through the fact that he's like around comedy people.
Yeah, and he's like a big improviser. And
yeah, but oh my God, am I in love with him now as an actor too. Like, he's just so funny and delightful. And it's just nice to see someone like Bridget Everett lead a show. She's like bawdy and over the top and a little messy in this. And like, it's just, yeah. She's great.
You and I were already fans of hers.
Yes.
Prior to the show, but for listeners who aren't familiar with her, they are familiar with her because we talked about her. She's in Patty Cakes.
Yes.
And
she's the mom in Patty Cakes.
Fantastic in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's not doing a Jersey accent in this one. Or trying to do a Jersey accent. She's from Kansas, and that's where this is based. I think it's not filmed in Kansas, but it's supposed to be like Manhattan, Kansas.
Right.
And it's about, going home when you're in your 40s and what that's like. And, taking stock of your life kind of in the middle of it when you have had sort of a major tragedy and you've got to figure out what the fuck to do next. But yeah, the episodes are relatively short. There's also only 14 total episodes across 2 seasons.
I could do that today.
You could do that easily in a day. Many of them directed by Jay Duplass, a couple by Lennon Parham, Robert Cohen. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know Lennon Parham was involved with the show that way.
She directed 2 episodes of it.
That's cool. She's
12
fantastic.
and 13. Yeah.
I think she's great.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of really cool people involved in it. You've got work to do.
I've got so much work to do. I know. I think you have one more before we get to ours, and I know that this is also one that I'm an idiot for not having watched yet.
So my shared number 1, the one that you haven't seen, is Reservation Dogs. When I finally finished the third and final season, it's not coming back, I wanted to just like scream to everyone I knew, like, please fucking watch this show. It's the first season, it took me a while to get into. I watched the first couple episodes and I was like, okay, yeah, this is interesting, sweet. It's a wildly different way of storytelling and a different perspective than I'm used to. I mean, it's from a native lens. It's produced by Sterling Harjo and Taika Waititi. And it's just a different type of story than I am used to. And it took me a while to kind of get into the groove of it. And then once I did and stopped having like my typical TV expectations of what a story was going to be week to week, you kind of fall into it and you're just like along for the ride. It's so fucking like hilarious. And like, it's really funny. Like, I think some people think about a story about 4 kids growing up on a reservation after the death of one of their friends. Like, the log line for it is not a cheerful story. It is so funny. And the cast, a lot of these kids were not known quantities before this, and they're just the person who plays Willie Jack, Paulina Alexis. Willie Jack is absolutely my favorite character. I cannot recommend it enough. It's the reason I say it was harder for me to get into at first was because it's not linear storytelling, right? In a way it is. The first season feels much more linear in that it's like the story of this group of 4 kids. Their friend has died. It's how they're coping with that. He always wanted to go to Los Angeles. The question is like, are they going to go to Los Angeles to honor their friend? But the real story is like literally everything else. That's sort of the way they structured it to start with, but that's really not the point. The third season, like a lot of people were like, thought should have ended at the second season because they kind of tied up a bunch of stuff. But then the third season, because they had tied up a bunch of stuff, gave them a chance to just really play. And they did some flashback episodes to like the native schools era. Like they just did so much important stuff. Oh my God. It's so great.
I have 2 shows. I have that that I watched and really liked this year before we get to the one that we both have as our number one that I think much of the world has as their number one as well. Do you want me to? I think
honestly, Reservation Dogs might edge out this one a tiny bit, but this is like 1A.
Right. Okay. Good to know. Do you want to hear my 2? The first one is, and I talked about it last week a little bit, and I know I am maybe I have more of an open heart for this than other people who care about this this, I don't even know what to call it, this brand, this friend, I don't know, is the new Muppet Show, Muppets Mayhem.
Oh yeah.
It's obviously different. It is, it's Disney, so there's that. It's modern and trying to be in a way that like other Muppets products aren't. Like one of the main characters on the show, one of the humans on the show is like a TikTok influencer. So there's a little bit of that. But the Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem in the center of it. So it's about Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem and a young woman who's like starting work at a record label, and she realizes that they still owe the label an album on their contract that they just never fulfilled way back in the 70s or the 60s or whatever. And so she meets up with them, and they have a little like group of people that they hang around with. The Mayhem have like a groupie who wants to be a music producer, and they all, kind of link up, and it's about her trying to get them to produce this album. And there's stuff that feels very old school Muppet Show to me, where like there's a cast of celebrities who show up for an episode and that kind of thing. But at the center of it is Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, and they feel really authentic to me.
Yeah.
So if you can be okay with the fact that it's 2023, and of course the show isn't going to feel like the old Muppet show.
Yeah.
Like, if you can be okay with that, I think it's really sweet. I think if you're someone who has kids, it's probably a good introduction to the Muppets. Because it will probably feel more relevant to them in a way that I didn't need it to be. Like,
Right. Right.
And I was just really excited to see those characters at the center of it. They've always been my favorite. Like, one of my favorite things about the Muppets is Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. So I was happy to have a few episodes, and it's only one season. And the music is great. The music is really great.
That's awesome.
I mean, they cover, okay. So there's like some original music and some covers, obviously, because that's always how Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem have been. But Linda Perry wrote some of the original music for it. Yeah. And then Mick Giacchino, who is Michael Giacchino, who he's like a huge music composer. He did the music for Lost. He worked on Ratatouille and Up.
Nice.
Yeah, and Mick is his son, and apparently they worked on Mick composed the music and Michael produced the original score for it. So it's got fantastic music at the very least. I think it's worth checking out just for that. And they do there's a cover of True Colors that makes me weep. It's it's very sweet.
Sometimes I wonder if a good amount of the resistance to things like Muppets Mayhem is literally that we're not used to seeing the Muppets in the quality of 2023.
Totally.
When we watched Emmett Otter last week, I was reminded of not just the fact that it's kind of old technology, right? Mm-hmm. All of it is practical. But also just the quality of the video is so poor compared to what we're used to that the idea of seeing something from my childhood recreated in 4K, I'm like, I don't know if I want to see it in 4K. If they did Muppets Mayhem, but they filmed it on a VHS, right? Would we be less resistant to it?
Yeah, I for me, I think that's part of it. For me, I definitely think that's part of it. I should also say Dave Goelz is still involved with it. Matt Vogel, who's been with the show, he's been with the Muppets for quite some time now. It's not all new people. It is quite a few. So if you can get past all of that, like you said, the quality of seeing them just looking just nice and crisp on screen.
That's the thing. It's you don't want to see a Muppet in 4K in a way.
Yeah.
But
so I will say, if you can get past all of that, I think it's really sweet. I think it's worth a watch. I think you can tell the people working on the show, do actually care about it and wanted it to be good. And it wasn't just, Muppets aren't really a cash grab. It's not like kids these days are clamoring.
Not anymore.
Yeah, right? So.
Yeah, it used to be you threw the Muppets label on anything and it was a guaranteed hit. Now it's not quite.
Yeah. And so it kind of bums me out that folks like me who really love, I cried last week. I could cry again right now. Who really love the Muppets were resistant to this just, mostly because it is current. I think that's, I thought it was really sweet.
For me, unfortunately, I think the Muppets are kind of that preserved in amber part of my childhood. It's hard to break that, but I also love that they're still trying to produce new content with, some people are don't touch it, and I get that too. But I also think that, there was so much good there that, why not try? Yeah. You've got such a great place to start from. Fucking Dr. Teeth, I don't know. If I was involved in, if I worked for the Henson Company, I would be, constantly wanting to see more of what's going on with Dr. Teeth. How's Janice doing? What's Animal up to these days?
Yeah.
How would you not want to know?
Exactly. And I think I don't know. I think if you are somebody who's been resistant for that reason, I think it's worth checking out and seeing how you feel about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm glad that it is because if I'm going to trust someone's opinion on whether a new Muppet thing is worth it, you're probably the person I would trust.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to be your next, it's not going to be finally another Muppet movie. It's not
Right.
that, but I do think it's.
But I like the
if
fact
you're hankering.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the fact that it's focused on Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, though. I think I think if you're going to revisit classic childhood IP like that, you have to find an angle and a take and a detail to pull on that hasn't been done to death,
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that Dr. Teeth was sort of an unexplored part of the Muppets.
Totally.
They were always just like a really cool, like, side part of whatever was happening.
I love them so much. So I'm happy to have some more of them.
Dr. Teeth, come on Andrea's podcast.
God, truly, again, only band on my vision board.
Yeah.
Someday.
Yep.
Someday.
Now, did you have another one before the one we both have?
I have one more, and it aired across the end of 2022 into 2023.
That's fair.
So I'm counting it because I think season 3 aired November 11th, 2022, and it finished up January 6th, 2023. So it probably missed.
Counts.
Yeah, I think so. Are you familiar with Mythic Quest?
No.
It's Rob McElhenney's show. Rob McElhenney of Always Sunny. And he and Charlie Day is one of the executive producers, and there are a bunch of other people involved. And despite a lot of what I'm going to talk about on this episode, I'm not a huge video game person, really. I usually get into like 1 or 2 games a year that I will be obsessed with. I'm also really not into like MMOs, like those big, massive multiplayer online games. But I'm prefacing with that because there are 2 things I'm going to talk about this episode that are deeply invested in that. And one of them is Mythic Quest. And Mythic Quest is it's an Apple TV show, so it's the only way you can watch it. But it's Rob McElhenney plays the lead of a game design studio. They run the like biggest MMO that exists, and it's just about the people at this game studio, but it's really sweet. It's like weirdly he plays like a pompous idiot in a lot of ways, but it is weirdly sweet for the way I just described it. It's about these people kind of like learning to live and work together, and they're all very different. And Danny Pudi is in it.
I love him.
Yeah, and Aparna Nancherla is in it.
Sorry. Oh, I love Aparna Nancherla.
Yeah. There are a bunch of like cameos that I won't. The cast is fantastic. There are also people like Ashley Birch, who, if you are a video game person, you would know her as she's a Hey Ash, What You Playing, which was a YouTube series with her and Anthony Birch, who's a this is such a side note, but he's a video game writer and he's the GM for one of my favorite D&D podcasts. Again, I'm not somebody who plays a ton of video games, and I don't play D&D, but the biggest...
This is the wildest fact about you that I have learned
genre
in the last 2 years
of art I consume is D&D actual play podcasts. I'm obsessed.
This is the wildest part of
improv.
Your personality. I know.
It's improv and taking time to really develop characters and stories. I'm obsessed with them.
No, I get it. It's just when you first told me, I don't play D&D, I just listen to a lot of D&D podcasts.
I think that's true for a lot of people.
I bet it is. It's just not something that I had ever thought was a thing. But yeah, I believe it.
Some of them are incredible. Maybe I'm going to recommend one later in this episode. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I will say I do love improv.
And it's just great. It's like improvisers, especially the ones I'm picky. There are a ton of actual play podcasts. Maybe I will recommend. I only had one in mind because it's new this year, but it's such a fun, I don't know if medium is exactly genre for people to play in, and all of the shows that I love started out very silly and still are. It's the other thing I love is because of the format, they are allowed to be very silly, and also sometimes I cry like a baby. And that's my favorite mix of things is emotional whiplash. But Mythic Quest is just very sweet. It's very fun. They have an incredible special that they made over quarantine under lockdown that is so good and made me. I watched all of season 1 and 2 right before season 3, but so I didn't actually watch the special air during lockdown, but it's something that like I watched and it didn't make me feel bad in hindsight. Like I think it would have been really comforting to watch it in 20. Yeah. And it's just really, it's like it for a show that has the potential to just be kind of silly and also kind of mean to its characters, because some of them are just really like, I'm trying to think of what to compare it to. And I don't really know exactly what, but it's Not Always Sunny. So if that's a show that is too mean and too like ungenerous to its characters for you, Mythic Quest is not that. It's really sweet. It's really well made. There's also an episode that is a standalone episode with South Jersey hometown girl Krista Milioti and Jake Johnson that is so good. It's so good.
I might actually check this out. Like when you first suggested that, like just the name to me, I'm like, nah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's me too. My housemate Kitsy, who also isn't a big video game person. I think they checked it out first because of Rob McElhenney's involvement. It's his show, but it's really fantastic. I love it. It's renewed for a 4th season. I don't know when we'll get that, obviously.
I will say that if things are on Apple TV, they tend to disappear from my radar because it is the one service that it's not the only one I don't have, but it is the one that I don't have that most often people will suggest something from.
Right.
But I did pay for it for a while when Severance was on, and I watched all of Severance, and then once
Did you watch Dickinson?
No.
The Emily Dickinson show?
That was something that was suggested to me, though.
Yeah, it might be worth it to pay for it and just like spend a week binging the couple, because that's the thing too. Mythic Quest is 3 seasons, but I think they're all like 8 to 10 episodes. They're not
Well, that's sort of the landscape now. It's like, okay, this service, I've got to wait until it has enough on it.
Yeah, because I can't pay monthly for 12 different services every month. Right. It's insane.
And so I've got to wait until there's enough on Apple TV that I'm like, okay, I'll pay for it for a month or two.
Yeah. I think there's a bunch on there right now that's probably worth
there was,
checking out.
When I was looking for something the other day, I know that Silo is on there, and you'd mentioned that one before.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay for Apple TV just for Silo, but that is, in hindsight, I thought about putting that on my list, honestly, just because I didn't watch that much this year, and I felt like maybe I needed a little more. I think I said that acting on that show is pretty bizarre, and the tone of the show is a little confused, I think. But the mood is really cool. The premise is really cool. I think it's worth checking out if you already have Apple TV.
Yeah.
But I loved Dickinson, and I loved Mythic Quest. So
nice. Are we at the?
Yeah, those are my 2. Again, I didn't watch a ton of TV this year.
Yeah, I did enough for both of us. But yeah, I would say number 1A, top of the list. Mm-hmm. The Bear. It's so good.
Oh my God.
Season
2. I mean, like season 1 is great, but my God, season 2.
Well, it's like it's not that easy to do a second season after like a killer first season that actually improves on it. It's just not. Mm-hmm. And it is better than the first season.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And if you're one of those people who is a little bit like me, and it's like, I think I get it. Like, I've heard enough people talk about it, and like, I know everybody loves it. And actually, if you're listening to this, you probably have maybe already watched it. But if for any reason you're resistant,
fucking do it.
Oh my God.
Do it.
It's just, I love a ragtag group of misfits.
I know. And like, the cast is just so great. I listened to, it wasn't the Prestige TV podcast. So I listen to a lot of podcasts on the Ringer Network. And it's The Watch with Andy Greenwald and Chris Ryan.
Is that the one we talked about?
Yeah, I've mentioned
early on a little bit.
Yeah, I've mentioned them, and I've mentioned the Prestige TV podcast with Mallory Rubin and think it's like a rotating cast. But The Watch, I don't agree with them all the time about their picks, but it's interesting to hear because they do recommend stuff that I wouldn't normally seek out, and then sometimes I end up really loving it. But anyway, all that to say, they just did an episode, end of year episode, where they picked they do the thing where they do their top 10 shows of the year, but then they also gave out like a special episode of the year award. And it was Forks.
Forks, of course.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And so they had the creator on.
Oh, cool.
Christopher Storer. And they also had Eben Moss-Backrack on to talk about filming that episode. And so a little side recommendation, that episode of The Watch, if you watched The Bear and you loved it as much as we did, that's a great episode where you really hear sort of the love between the creator and the actor. And like he talked about how lonely it was to film that episode because they're such a like tight community and they like love working together. But he was by himself for a lot of that in this restaurant. Oh
yeah, that's such a good point. Jodie just said something that I just said we're going to cut, but there is a moment in that episode that is like, it's every emotion. It's like the definition of catharsis. Like you just, that episode is just,
And to hear them talk about it and how they approached it as the episode following the previous episode.
Yeah.
Which to a lot of people was the peak of the season. And then they followed it up with this much quieter episode.
The two of them together.
That pairing is so, like, that is every emotion. That takes you through all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
this show, I know there's like a lot of conversation about the fact that, you know, shows release a whole season at a time. And that's something that people our age, or it's still a little new to us, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to binge something the second it comes out. But the experience of watching, of the way those episodes built on each other.
Yeah.
I love The Bear. I love The Bear so much. It's just really ambitious, but in a way that like feels really confident, which isn't always the case.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. It's like, there's lots of shows out there that are really experimental and trying things. And often that's rewarding, but there's a dud in there somewhere, or there's a moment when it doesn't work. And I feel like The Bear doesn't have that.
No.
Like there aren't episodes where I'm like, oh, they really tried that. That's really cool that they went for it, but not quite. No, they all work.
Yep.
They all fucking work.
It's really astounding. That show is just, it's pretty
and the other
perfect.
thing is like people that haven't watched it and are like, I don't know if I really care enough about this character that Jeremy Allen White seems to be playing, this like tough guy chef, to watch a whole 2 seasons. It's not about him.
It's one of those shows. And also, tough guy chef,
but it's not,
like you will I'm so sorry to tell you, you will fall in love with him. Sorry.
Of course.
Sorry, you will. But it's a
but
ragtag
the surrounding
group.
Cast is incredible.
It's another one of those
Uribe,
shows.
Yeah. Everyone is lovely.
Yeah.
Even Moss-Backrack is the person that I hated the most in the first season because he's the character that would like rub me the wrong way the most, and the one that I loved the most at the end. Richie.
They're all, and it's also like, you know how some shows will do a thing like Richie's a really good example where he's a good example of what am I trying to say? There will be a show where there will be a character at the beginning who is irredeemable. And then 5 seasons in, he's your favorite character. And you're like, oh, but he was so awful at first. Richie isn't that. Richie is like the show. This is what I mean about it being confident is like Richie is a pain in the ass, but he's not like, there's no villain in this show.
Right.
He's the biggest pain in the ass in the show for sure.
Yeah.
But they just all feel, I think that's what it is. Like they all feel so real. So nobody is one thing.
It is really about like, can people change? That's like the whole thesis of the show is like people trying to be something different than they were before, but like not in a negative way.
It's just so beautiful.
I love it. I love it.
And it's very Chicago, which means it feels very like
Jersey adjacent.
It just feels good. It's like
those
I think
vibes.
there are people who, especially season 1, they're like, there's a lot of yelling in the show, and that might be stressful for you unless you're used to hearing that as a kind of love language. watch.
Yeah.
You know, like there's just a lot of loud.
Unless
people.
you've ever been to a bagel shop in New Jersey.
Exactly. It is very stressful at times too. Though.
Yeah.
It is sometimes hard to watch because it is so stressful. But that makes it really fun too, and that makes those quiet moments you're talking about so rewarding.
Absolutely.
I think we talked about The Bear for too long.
I think so too, but we'll move on. It's okay. We have almost nothing for movies.
Perfect.
As a podcast that has covered movies for the longest time now,
wasn't the plan.
I don't watch a lot of movies. I hate to tell you.
I usually do. I just didn't. I was too busy watching our movies. This year, I think.
Yeah. I was looking at
the strike made it hard because I didn't know what was even happening.
So I have one I loved, one I fully enjoyed, and then one that I found really confusing that was on a lot of top 10 lists, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, the only movie I saw this year at theaters that I would recommend, and again, I really revealing an area of my life that we don't often talk about, was the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. It is a movie for people who love Dungeons and Dragons, and it is a movie for people who just love big fun movies, because it does not get in the weeds, but it is so aware of the game that created it. There are things where a plan will go terribly awry, and it feels like you are watching a movie that is being played at a table. There are moments where a plan that should have worked just fine goes terribly awry, and it's because if you're somebody who plays a game or listens to many podcasts about the game, you know that somebody had a really terrible role at the table, right? But they're never really used. You can watch my housemate and I saw it together, and they're not as invested in D&D products as I am, and they had a great time. It's just it feels like. It felt, they don't make them like this anymore. It felt to me sort of like an Indiana Jones or any of those big action spectacles that were really funny, and we really only get versions of those anymore. I feel with Marvel movies, and I'm so exhausted by the Marvel universe. So this just felt fresh and different and fun, and there's so many fun little cameos in it, and that is a category
of movie. Yeah, that's a category of movie that's kind of been taken over by the superhero complex.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The, giant fun action movie with some silliness and some big set pieces. And
and I think Marvel is just it's so I'm just so bored. By it. But it is a genre that I have always loved, and it felt really good to have. I would watch. I hope they do one a year. I know they won't, but I would happily watch one a year until I got exhausted by it, the way that I'm exhausted by Marvel. It was just really fun and looked really cool, and and it's another ragtag group of misfits, which is what's so good about D&D. Every adventuring party is a ragtag group of misfits. So, I really loved that movie. I had a great time with it. Check it out.
The only one that I saw in the theater this year was Barbie. And I don't think we need to elaborate on Barbie. It's been elaborated on enough by lots of people. Quick opinion, I really enjoyed myself. I didn't find it I wasn't bothered by it in the way a lot of people were, and I also wasn't rapturous about it. What I loved the most about it was the way it looked, to be honest. It was just, if that movie does not win set design, costume design, I know it's up for a lot of that stuff. It was such an interestingly created world with so many practical effects. That's the thing that was so amazing to me. It was not CGI. It was built sets with people moving wave cutouts and things, but it looks so good.
That's really cool.
I think if you're a person that cares about aesthetics in movies, I would go and watch some of the behind the scenes stuff about how they did some of those effects. That, as a visual person, that was the thing that I enjoyed the most about it. Within 5 minutes of sitting in the theater, I was I feel like I'm in an acid trip, and I'm happy about it.
You have made me,
So
just with this little review here, more interested in watching the movie than I have been this whole time. I think it seems to be, as someone who hasn't seen the movie, reactions are either from people who are already so aware of and like immersed in conversations around like feminism in particular, that this movie feels kind of like handholdy and eye rolly to them, or for people who are not so much, who it was more of like a learning experience and are really in love with that version of it. And I think those two parties have been at odds over this movie. And so to hear from someone kind of in the middle who's like, I don't know it.
Yeah, because it was handholdy around the feminist stuff, and like I think that's fine. I don't care. You know, no, I don't go to Barbie for my like high intellectual feminist takes. But visually, the experience was so cool.
Right.
So cool. And it won't be the same on a smaller screen, but it's still worth seeing that. Like, just the way that Greta Gerwig built that world is amazing. Yeah, the first 5-10 minutes, I turned to my friend that I was sitting with, and I was like, I feel like I'm on acid. Like, but I'm enjoying it.
That's very cool.
It's not my experience with acid.
It's the good kind.
Yeah. Yeah, doing acid in like Barbie Land. So I have one more movie that is the one I loved. That is, a lot of people are putting this on their lists now for the movies of the year. Most of those movies of the year I haven't seen. The one I have seen and I can vouch for is Past Lives. Have you encountered this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Greta Lee from Russian Doll, Sweet Birthday Baby. She is the lead in this. It's by Celine Song, her first directorial debut. It is so beautiful and so quiet and so thoughtful. I'll just give you a quick little, this is too long of a recap of the plot, but basically it's about these two classmates, 12 years old. They kind of have like a little childhood romance, and then Greta Lee's character moves across the world from Korea. They're both, they grew up in Korea. She moves across the world to Canada and then to New York. And it's about this idea of like the connection, not the one that got away. That's way too easy of a way to put it. But like the connection that you have that you've always wondered about with someone from earlier in your life. And so these two people, they reconnect when they're adults, and it is so, so beautiful. I saw it in the basement of the artist residency I was at in Nebraska with a bunch of other artists, and we were all in love with it. It's also really beautiful. I just realized that it was actually shot on 35 millimeter film, and that is probably why. It is stunning. It has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, which we've talked about how Rotten Tomatoes is possibly bullshit, but it's deserved. It's up for 1 million awards for like Oscar season and Golden Globes and everything. And it's, I think, well deserved.
Yeah, that sounds lovely.
I'll also just quickly mention May December, which I watched, which is the Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, Todd Haynes movie. Right.
The Mary Kay Letourneau story.
Yeah, I think technically it's not, but it's like very closely...
It's loosely based or inspired by.
Yeah, exactly. It's also on a lot of year-end lists, and I found this movie confusing. Its tone is wildly all over the place. It's really melodramatic.
Did we talk on mic last week about how it keeps getting the camp label applied to it?
I don't know if that was on mic or not, but yeah, we did. We mentioned that. And I don't think camp is the right label for it. I think melodrama. I mean, I didn't not like it. I just found myself like, after I watched it.
Did that feel like that was what it was going for?
No, actually. Oh. I feel like what it was going for was like, it feels very sincere in its attempt to talk about these complicated relationships just through this very melodramatic framework. But I don't know. The guy that played, I want to say Charles Melton, the guy that played the husband that was like a child when they got together, is up for awards this season for supporting actor. He was great. I will say he was in Riverdale. That's where people know him from, which I never watched.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's really good. I don't know how you play a character who, like, his role in May, December is a man who has 2 children with this woman who he got together with when he was 13 years old. Mm-hmm. She gave birth to his children in prison. Like, and they're still together living in this house, and he is a father, but he's like in his late 20s. Like, it's just, he's a father. Like, these kids are going away to college soon. It's just, right. I don't know how you access like what it would be like to be that person.
Yeah, right.
But he's really good in it. I don't know. I can't say I like highly recommend it, but it's interesting.
That's a kind of recommendation.
Yeah, it's like it gave me something to think about.
Don't come for Jodie if you don't have a great time watching it, because it sounds like Jodie's not saying you're gonna.
No, you might. Depends.
Yeah, some people it seems like are really loving it. So
yeah, it's gotten a lot of really good feedback, and that's why I watched it, and it was definitely interesting. But I don't know, man. Okay, should we move on to our other categories?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about books. I don't read. No, I do, but
I despite the last couple of years, I used to read so much that it would be annoying to listen to me right now. But this year, I really only I have 2 books I'm going to suggest. I know that this episode I am styling myself as a weird, like, video game obsessive. I'm really not. But the 2 books I'm going to recommend are both deeply invested in video games. This is just how it shook out this year. Yeah. And so the first one is one that a lot of people have been talking about. It's made a lot of lists, whether you're a video game person or not. And it's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Oh, Visual Aid.
Yeah, yep. It's the book. There it is. It's the book I picked up at Target this week for the Poconos, because I forgot to bring any books with me. And if you're at a lake house, you've got to have a book with you.
You do, yeah.
And it's Gabrielle Zevin's most recent book, and it is about 2 people who bonded over video games in the like early 90s as children. And it is just, I'm not going to say too much, but it's about them kind of how that propelled both of their lives into young adulthood, and how they reconnect, and then about them like Mythic Quest kind of building a successful game design studio. But it's also just a story about like love and friendship and blah 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 blah. You know, that's really the setting for it.
Yeah, and
it's really gorgeously written more than anything. Like I think if you have seen people talk about this and you're like, I don't really care about video games, so I'm not going to check it out. Check it out. I think it's really great. I like sat down to read a couple of pages, and then an hour had flown by. It's one of those for me.
So what's the second one?
Yeah, no, the second one is called Critical Hits: Writers Playing Video Games. I don't know. I don't know what happened this year. It's so good. It's so good. It's a collection of essays, and it is edited by J. Robert Lennon and Carmen Maria Machado, who is she's amazing. She's amazing. She's incredible. Yeah. I love her. I love everything she does. She's fantastic. And she and J. Robert Lennon put together this collection of essays that are technically, I guess, sort of about video games, but it's so much more about using a game, typically each essay, as a like framework and or lens to write through some other issue, kind Carmen Maria Machado writes in the introduction, it's so much of it has to do with being a queer woman, of course, and how what you can learn, what your kind of like gaming style can tell you about your queer identity and what your queer identity, how that can, it's really fun. Hanif Abdurraqib,
I love her.
She's amazing. If you've never read anything of hers, go read everything. Her Body and Other Parties, In the Dream House is an incredible,
they're both really
cool memoir. She's unbelievable. I can't say enough good things about her. And then, the essay that made me seek out the book in general, though, is Hanif Abdurraqib, who is my favorite. He's my
That's how you found it.
Yeah, he's my favorite writer. He's maybe my favorite person. I just think everything he does is incredible. And he has an essay about Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a game I've never played. I know very little about.
Yeah.
But it's because it's Hanif Abdurraqib, it's actually about grief and loss and longing and love. And it's so beautiful. I wept. Everything he does, I weep. He's got a new book coming out in March of next year that I'm really, 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 really excited for. He's another one who, if you've never read Hanif, he's an incredibly talented poet. His poems are knock you on your ass poems, but he's also a culture writer and an essayist, and a lot of what he does is kind of creative nonfiction sort of memoir. He's always writing through he is almost always writing through some personal concern that has that speaks to a more universal issue at the same time through some piece of pop culture. That's his sweet spot. It's not the only thing he does, because he can, I know I'm being a full Hanif Abdurraqib simp right now, but he can do anything. And then also, if you follow him on Instagram, you get to see incredible, lovely pictures of his dog, Wendy, who he's also a big Bruce Springsteen fan. And I found him because he early on used to write about Fall Out Boy a lot. And in his book, They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, which is a collection of essays he wrote a few years back. He's done a few books in between. He has just, again, the most incredible essay about grief and loss told through his relationship as a fan of Fall Out Boy and through Fall Out Boy's career up until that point. That is, again, like I said about all the video game stuff, even if you do not care about Fall Out Boy, I used to teach it. I used to use that one, and an essay he wrote about My Chemical Romance, shout out Jersey Band. That's our Jersey connection this week. I used to teach them in my comp classes, and my students had no reference for Hanif, Fall Out Boy, or really My Chemical Romance, and they always loved those essays. He's unreal.
Yeah. I have one book. Can I recommend a book I haven't read yet?
Yeah, absolutely you can. I love that.
The only reason I haven't read it yet is
it's a speculative recommendation.
Yeah. I've been saving. Well, I'm pretty confident about my recommendation. It's a book I haven't read yet because I've been saving it for this week.
Okay.
And it is no surprise here. Jesse David Fox's comedy book, How Comedy Conquered Culture,
of course,
and the magic that makes it work. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm confident about this is because I have been listening to Jesse David Fox's podcast for a long time, good one, and I have heard him interviewed about this book and the way it's structured and the references he's pulling in. He literally mentioned John Berger, who
he's so thoughtful about the thing he cares about in a way that I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is my favorite thing, which is somebody being super nerdy about the thing they love the most, but also pulling in historical research and citing, theory and philosophy, and also bringing in personal story. There's a whole section on Maria Bamford and how he connected with her stories about losing her mother because he lost a family member recently. And so I have not read this book. It is
it's
on my iPad
fantastic.
waiting for me to take it to, it's waiting for me to take it to the lake with me. But I did hear him read an excerpt from it also when it first came out. And it is in his voice, which if you have ever listened to Good One, is this very like kind of dry, sensitive, silly, but also really thoughtful voice. So if you care about stand-up comedy at all, I feel like it's something that would be really interesting to get into.
Yeah, and if you care about stand-up comedy at all and aren't listening to Good One, I'm going to throw that in as a little side recommendation. It's so good.
It's also how I've discovered a lot of because like, you know, if you're looking for comedy specials to watch, there's the big names that everybody knows, but then there's also sort of random ones that you wouldn't have found otherwise, that he either did an interview with the person or it ended up on his top 10 list that I would never have looked for otherwise.
Totally.
And ended up really enjoying.
Yeah. So yeah, that's also a recommendation from me for a book I also haven't read. So we'll double co-sign that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's all we got for books.
I used to be an English teacher. Like, isn't that bad?
I mean, I spent my entire childhood curled up with a book. Like, I am a book nerd, and I have not read a lot of books for pleasure in the last couple of years.
So before, I think we'll end with, we said comedy specials and podcasts. The two things I do consume constantly, I am always either listening to a podcast or listening to music. I do not, or I'm editing a podcast or recording a podcast, but I am never in silence ever. It's probably an issue. But I just want to recommend, there's a lot of really great music out this year. Shout out to my other podcast, Left of the Dial. We have a huge countdown, 2023 countdown coming out this week. So check that out if you are looking for new music, especially stuff that isn't covered on like Pitchfork. But I'm going to recommend 3 very quickly for ones that I think like are in a kind of conversation with our podcast enough that I want to highlight them here. Okay. One is Warriors. Warriors is I call them a Jersey band. I think they got together in Brooklyn. Lauren, who is the front person of that band, certainly doesn't live in Jersey and has not for a long time. But I think of them as a Jersey band because, you know, once a Jersey band, always a Jersey band. Warriors is an incredible band. I have loved everything that Lauren has put out. But Trust Your Gut was released in September, and it's just fantastic. It's a great album. It's Warriors is just a really good, like, kind of like rock pop rock.
Yeah, I was gonna say
band.
For someone that's not familiar, where would you place it in the sort of styles? I know it's a broad question and hard to classify, but like loosely.
They're they're like a pop rock band. They're like an indie pop rock band. I don't know. Okay. Kind of punk adjacent. I think that's one of the things about Warriors is they are really unique. Lauren Denitzo is just like a really unique, thoughtful writer and producer. The thing that the thing that always sticks out to me for Warriors, and I talked about it a lot on Left of the Dial, is Lauren's attention to how a song can and should build, and to dynamics, and kind of how we were talking about stand-up specials of being like really, and TV sequencing, really like leaning into when a quiet moment should be a quiet moment and the way a song should build. It's just always really interesting. And then also just catchy as hell. Warriors rules.
Nice.
And Trust Your Gut rules. You know what? I'll drop in a few seconds of it. So that's
smart.
Yeah, that'll narrow down the style for you.
I just been waiting for my life for a long time. They keep telling you that it'll be fine. Think it's too good to be true. Well, it probably is. Lately I've been feeling just a little off. If not you, then baby, who can I trust? If you're not just yes me today, then prove me wrong.
Big fan. Fall Out Boy. So much for Stardust. I'm so sorry. It's so good. It's
You
so
wouldn't
good.
be you if you didn't throw Fall Out Boy in.
And even if you think you know, but you have no idea about that band. Ignore, like, I know that
This is the most energy you've had this entire podcast.
Because everybody shut up. I hate shut up. Shut up is so mean. It really upsets me, and I just said it. That's how you know I mean it. That album is huge and cinematic and beautiful, and it is on one hand a sort of return to form of their like playing instruments in a room way of making music, but then also Patrick, who is their lead songwriter, though not lead lyricist, but whatever, has been scoring movies and TV for the last few years. So like that is brought into this too. It's just it's truly a fantastic album. And I wish that there were a way to make people listen to it without knowing who the band is. So everybody could eat just the most humble pie. Cause it is, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. And I would be saying that even if I'd never heard this band before and it was my first time encountering this album. It's truly fantastic.
Andrea recommending Indie Darling, Fall Out Boy.
Okay, Mark Maron. So much for Stardust. It's so good. Yeah, but I think people listening to our podcast think and I mean this as a compliment, think they're too cool for Fall Out Boy. You know what I mean? Like you're all rolling your eyes because I said it, but they fucking rule. They're so good. They're so good, and I love them.
Sometimes things that are popular for a reason.
Yeah. And honestly, Fall Out Boy is kind of popular despite itself because they have made I love them so much, and I could talk about them forever. And if the best Fall Out Boy podcast hadn't already been started this year, there's little foreshadowing for what's coming up later. I would still be threatening to start a Fall Out Boy podcast. But they have just made the craziest choices. And I think because they have stayed in the public eye with like having a huge single every few years, people don't really know what else goes on with that band, but they're just always having a good time. And I love them so much. And this album it's amazing. This is a hard moment for me. This is the last album I'm going to recommend today.
Ooh.
So Fall Out Boy is my favorite band.
Yeah.
My other favorite band, the best band to have ever banded, broke up just last month.
Oh, God. I wondered if we were going to talk about this.
Well, we have to because they also put out the other best album of 2023, and maybe
going out with a bang.
I know. And maybe their best album, maybe. Everything they have done has been incredible. But Screaming Females, Desire Pathway.
Yeah.
I cannot explain how important Screaming Females is to me and how much I have loved that band. And but their breakup was a heartbreak for me. And it is it would almost be better if if Desire Pathway weren't so good. Truly it's an incredible album. They're the best. You asked like what Warriors, like where they land, and it's almost hard to say for Screaming Females because they've been doing their own thing forever. They're a punk band through and through, but they're also just their own thing. They're like a big punk kind of grungy, huge. They're just the best. And Marissa, who is their front woman, was their front woman. Whoa, is a powerhouse and is like literally one of the best guitar players of all time. And the rest of the band is also incredible. But Marissa's like undeniably just one of the best. Like,
and her voice is
unreal.
So notable.
She's just like probably my favorite front person on the planet, and I'm sure that she'll keep making music because she's done solo stuff that is also incredible. Desire Pathway it's a masterpiece beginning to end.
Yeah. I wondered if Screaming Females was going to come up because of that. I saw that on Instagram too, that they broke up.
Heartbreak.
Yeah.
I've been truly, like, not to get to whatever, but I've like been lucky enough to work with Screamales in a very limited capacity. We've shot and live streamed a couple of their shows.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that that Left will be able to make those available for folks to see if they didn't see the live stream, because they're just the best. I mean, the best live band. And Marissa did the Lefto podcast right before Desire Pathway came out. So folks can check that out too. If they're a band you haven't checked out, just do a deep dive and listen to every single thing they've done, including, we talked about them on your episode of Lefto, because they have an incredible Marissa and I guess it's the whole band, Screaming Females and Garbage, do a cover of Because the Night that is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They also do a cover of Shake It Off that is just...
Which is so good.
It's unreal. It's unreal. So yeah, Screamales forever. And
yes. And I will not be recommending music because my Spotify Wrapped was embarrassing. Nobody needs to know that I still listen to music from 20 years ago and have not learned anything new.
Jodie, this podcast, our Yellowjackets podcast, where we are deeply obsessed with, where every movie we watch is 20 years old. And yeah, I don't think anybody's surprised.
My music taste is what you would expect. Let's just leave it at that.
Nothing wrong with that.
With a little Brandy Carlisle thrown in because I'm in my 40s.
Nothing wrong with any of that.
Okay. Maybe we should go to comedy specials before we do podcasts. Mm-hmm. Do you have... So I have a top 3, and then one that I have to include, even though it's from last year. I don't care. And I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about these top 3 because none of these people need my help. I'll just name my top 3, and actually I will probably also recommend one that I haven't seen yet. Just well, you'll understand why. Okay, so my top 3 that I've seen are Gary Goldman, Born on Third Base, Maria Bamford, Local Act, and Mark Maron from Bleak to Dark. None of these people need my help. These are like titans of comedy. But I will say, I'll just say a little bit about each of them. Gary Goldman, did not expect a comedy special about income inequality from him.
That's so funny.
It was excellent.
I love him so much.
I love him. I mean, The Great Depression was like one of those sort of masterpiece hours where you watch it and you know you're watching something really special. Mm-hmm. I don't think this rises to that level, but I don't think it's one of those things where when you produce something, it's like the Nanette thing, right? You produce something so singular that following that up is always challenging.
I've been thinking a lot about this in general, specifically because of Good One. In their top countdown list, they talked about 2 different kinds of specials. The one that's like the thing that is like elevating or taking a comedian to the next level and doing something really special and singular, like The Great Depression, for example. Or there are also sometimes specials that are great, but it's like kind of checking in.
Yeah, here's what I've been up to.
Yeah, and can also be really great, but maybe isn't going to be the thing that's totally going to win you over on a comedian if you don't already love them.
Yeah, I could see that for Born on Third Base. That said, I think that...
But if you're already someone at the level of Gary Goldman, even his checking in is going to be...
Exactly. And I think that what worked for me about it was the fact that it's like this tall, sort of authoritative white man on stage that you don't expect to be talking about like welfare and food stamps and growing up poor. Mm-hmm. And of course, just being hilariously funny about it the whole time. Mm-hmm. So I do recommend that one. I just watched it this past week and I really liked it. I also,
fantastic.
Getting even more meta, the interview with Jesse David Fox on Good One about his book was done by Gary Goldman. And it's a lovely interview between the two of them.
Yeah, it's a great episode. That's a good one to start with if you haven't listened to Good One, I think.
Yeah, they clearly
even though it flips the script.
Yeah. But they clearly have a lot of love and respect for each other. Mm-hmm. Mark Maron, again, no one needs my help to recommend Mark Maron generally if you're like a comedy person. I will say that I go back and forth on him. Sometimes I find him too old school, aggressive white man. Mm-hmm. But this one, you know, he lost his partner, Lynn Shelton, during the pandemic. And it's like his usual gruffness mixed with some real new understanding of grief and loss that he didn't have before. It's really beautiful, honestly. Like, I think it might be my favorite special of his. And I've watched all of them. Like, I do respect him as a comedian, and I like the way that he tells stories. So this and the Maria Bamford special deal in very different ways with loss. And I think one of the reasons I'm excited to read the Jesse David Fox book is because one of the things he's talking about is the way that comedy is useful in those times, right? And so for comedians to be finding ways to talk about that on stage, I think it's really interesting to see how they do it and to see the different approaches. So yeah, I do really recommend that special. I think it's a combination of commenting on our current like social situation and how like fucked up everything feels, but also then the personal experience of loss and how he coped with that. Do you have one that you want to throw in that I haven't mentioned?
I'm going back and forth because so many of them are like you said, like it's like Birbiglia's special is unbelievable. His specials are always fantastic. He's maybe my favorite storyteller in general. He, he's so directly up my alley, and I just
The Old Man in the Pool is the new one.
Yeah, it's that, and the new one was the old one. The new one is the old one.
The new one is the old one. The Old Man in the Pool is the new one,
and it's exquisite. It's just he's just so thoughtful about what he does, and there are like a couple of really surprising elements in this. He's just always, and I know that he is he works so hard on his specials, and he's just so thoughtful about every word and every action, and it's just
I will say, so like I said, the people that we're recommending are not under the radar.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there are lots of big ones this year.
But just like with the Marc Maron thing, like if somebody hasn't gotten around to the Birbiglia special, but like thinks, oh yeah, Mike Birbiglia, he's great, go watch it.
Yeah, it's lovely, and the stage design is really cool.
Yeah,
and
I love
so
what he
fun.
did this time. He really, the last couple, were really thoughtful and like very restrained until specific moments.
Exactly. Yeah,
that I really appreciated.
Yeah, that's a really good. That's a good way to describe those specials and Birbiglia's approach, I think, to stand up in general.
Yeah.
Also, if you're listening to us and you haven't listened to, so Geth's special this year is a different one because it's an Audible exclusive,
right?
And it doesn't have a visual component. So I think it might not be on your radar for those two reasons, but it's fantastic. It's great.
Yeah.
I was very, very lucky to be on the road with Geth a lot this year. Over the last really 2 years as he was working this one out and watching
A Father
it. In
the Sun is what it's called, right?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's called A Father in the Sun. And it is in part about being a new father, and it is also in part about having a father, and that's where I really clicked into it. But it's also just about, but it's also, if those two things don't speak to you directly, it's also just, what I was going to say is like watching it come together this last year and like learning how thoughtful Geth is in his process about like making sure that everything kind of like serves the greater story. Mm-hmm. And there are so many over the last 2 years, like jokes and bits and lines that got cut from it that really killed in the room and were really funny, but weren't building toward the payoff of that special. Yeah. And so knowing that like just everything in it is there for a reason was really cool to see, and is also like a testament to just how well crafted it is.
I saw it early on, I think, when he was in Boston.
You saw,
and I haven't revisited it to see what's changed, but that's a good reminder. Yeah, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. It's a good reminder to go listen to it.
So I would say again, if you haven't checked it out yet, if you're spending a couple hours a week listening to us, but you haven't listened to A Father and the Son yet, go listen to Getsu's special.
I will just briefly highlight Maria Bamford. I know I just said that when I was talking about Jesse David Fox, but Local Act is her latest comedy special. And she's like one of the best to ever do it. And she's like a certified genius at this. I cannot, nobody needs, me to tell them that Maria Bamford is great, but like, just know that her new special is just as good as the rest of them and 100% worth your time. She did just lose both of her parents, but it doesn't feel like it's about that necessarily. There's just jokes that mention that. There's a moment in it where she does an act out where I literally snorted in my apartment by myself. And anyone who's watched stand-up specials alone knows that like there's this stand-up special that you're like smiling and kind of like nodding along the whole time. And then there's this special where you like lose it out loud. It's a harder thing to laugh out loud by yourself.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot more. And she did an act out that I like audibly just snorted by myself. So
I love that. What no better testament to.
Yeah. It was fantastic.
She's also the best. I love
It's on, I think it's on Apple TV, or you have to buy it on iTunes. I rented it for like, I think like $5. Absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Awesome. Comedy's so good. I'm so glad for comedy.
I know. Oh, wait, can I say my one from last year? Really quick?
Yeah. Was it late last year?
I don't think so. It's just the one that I keep wanting to rewatch.
Okay.
It came out 2022.
I hope it came out in January. I hope it's a full year. 2 years away.
I don't know when it came out. I definitely saw it a while ago. Okay, it came out in August. It's not that
bad. No.
So just because it is an under the radar one. Did you ever watch, I know I mentioned it to you, Shang Wang's Sweet and Juicy?
No.
It's on Netflix. There's a bit about warm paper that I still think about. It's one of those ones that like I went into thinking, oh, it's going to be another one where I just kind of like smile and nod and like Jesse David Fox recommended it. It's probably decent.
Yeah.
And he got me a couple of times with the out loud laughing. So warm paper.
That. Okay.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, Sweet and Juicy, Shang Wang. And then also one I haven't watched yet, but have on my list. Unfortunately, The Late Kenny DeForest.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, comedy lost a really, really good person a couple weeks ago. And he has a free YouTube special called Don't You Know Who I Am that came out in August that I plan on watching. From all reports, was a genuinely lovely person and died in an accident, tragically.
Yeah. I know we mention him every week, but Pete Holmes just re-aired his interview with him from, I think, 2022?
Yeah, it was a really delightful interview.
It's
I re-listened.
Fantastic. Yeah, me too. It's great.
Yeah.
Really sad.
Yep. Okay. We're going to have to control ourselves with this last category because this podcast has already gone long and we could be going another 2 hours to talk about podcasts because, like I said, I subscribe to probably 50 podcasts. I don't listen to every episode of every single one of those, but it's a problem. I also can't sit in silence.
Yep. I'm going to be so brave and so restrained, and I'm only going to talk about 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. All right. Let's go back and forth. You go first.
I'm going to just quickly, I foreshadowed it back when we were talking about music. There's a podcast that I've been shouting about from the rooftops. It is called Sugar We're Going In, and it is a Fall Out Boy podcast, but it is specifically about, and this is what I mean about people not really knowing the lore of Fall Out Boy, it is about Fall Out Boy's like involvement with and interest in and overlap with hip hop in particular. So they were on Island Def Jam at one point, and like Jay-Z opens one of their albums, and they've had different like Lil Wayne features on an album, Burna Boy features on an album. Pete Wentz is really, and Patrick Stump are both really interested in rap and hip hop, and have kind of like, they were a band that really kind of styled their trajectory off of like much more like a hip hop artist than like a punk band. And Scarlett Estelle, who is the host, is like, it's a thing where it's like, even if you don't care about Fall Out Boy, it is a podcast where someone who is really, really, really knowledgeable about a subject matter and really excited to share it with her audience. And it's just so cool to hear somebody talk about something they're excited about in that way. It's also really cool because it started as a really small thing, and it's not even a year old yet. But it has been gaining so much traction, and so like watching her like guests get closer and closer to the band, and like more and more involved with the band's history is really, really cool. And you can just tell she loves making that show so much and is so thoughtful about it. And I'm such a fan of Scarlett and her podcast. I've been shouting it out everywhere that I can. So
nice.
So that's my first one. Sugar, We're Going In. I really think give it a whirl, even if you go home. I don't know where you are.
Go home.
Go to your room. Listen to So Much for Stardust and listen.
You're grounded.
Exactly.
Making you go to your room and listen to a Fall Out
So
Boy
Much for
podcast.
Stardust, and then Sugar, We're Going In. You'll have a great time. I promise.
Oh God. Okay. Let's see. I think my first one is going to be sort of a niche. Well, you've been recommending Dungeons and Dragons things.
I was going to say.
So this is a niche thing. But I've been really enjoying lately the Handsome podcast.
Oh yeah.
We talked about this offline at one point. It's like three of my favorite comedy people: Mae Martin, Fortune Feimster, and Tig Notaro. Mm-hmm. And it's just the three of them. The premise is kind of It's like a celebrity asks them a question or asks them to talk about something. They talk about it. That's not the point of the podcast, really. It's just these three really funny people like hanging out, and they're developing sort of this like podcast lore. Mm-hmm. Mae Martin, it turns out, is one of those people that just has lots of random facts in their brain. And so they just kind of like randomly pull things out. And now there's a May fact button that they push when May has a random fact about Rumpelstiltskin. If you like comedy, especially queer comedy, I feel like these three are just a delight together. It's like a bit of fluff. It's not like anything that you'll necessarily be thinking about for a long time, but it's fully enjoyable. They've started posting the videos on YouTube, and I recommend that as well, watching them, because the three of them together, the 2 episodes I've seen on YouTube, they're all wearing suits and sitting around in Tig's studio. I've been a fan of Tig Notaro for a long time. I've seen
of course,
her multiple times live, and the three of them together are just they're really fun.
Yeah,
so, that is my first recommendation.
Yeah, I love all of the three of them so much. And 2 things I will say is that like I sometimes have my nose in the air a little bit at this point, where the podcast is just like, we got people that we already know because of the way the podcast industry is right now. We got people we already know have an audience. We put them together and and that's just what the podcast is going to be. Like, it's a little bit of the like,
we came up with a really loose construct.
It's like the Smartless effect, a little bit of like, big networks will not launch a podcast if they can't already be sure there's an audience built in, and that's really tough. But the three of them are so wonderful, and I love them all so much that I'm like, but sometimes that's okay. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, the personalities of the three of them together are really fun and silly. Like Fortune is definitely on the goofier side of things, and there's like an age difference. And...
Yeah, and I mean Tig has been part of the podcast world. Like, Don't Ask Tig. That's what it's called, right? Yep. So she's not new to podcasting by any stretch of this. So that makes me feel a little better about it too.
Yeah. I just think they're really fun together as a group. It's got a catchy theme song.
Do you love a catchy theme song?
Yeah. Yeah. So Handsome. That's my first recommendation.
Cool.
Also, it fits well because it's relatively new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's new this year, right?
I think it's been around less than a year.
Yeah, I was going to say like the last few months. Back to D&D. Again, I listen to so many. I'm only going to recommend one. It's Worlds Beyond Number, and it is also, if you're involved in or aware of the D&D actual play podcast community, I might as well be recommending Mark Maron. Like it's huge. But that is a pretty small world. I think I would guess most of our listeners aren't involved and don't know what Worlds Beyond Number is. Worlds Beyond Number is it's an actual play podcast, which means that it's people sitting around, their microphones technically playing D&D, but what they're really doing is using the game mechanics to put like parameters on and structure and shape the story they're building together. And it is Brennan Lee Mulligan is the GM. He's the game master, and he's been running professional like D&D podcast games for years now. He's also like an improviser who came up through UCB. So he's an incredible storyteller. And then the people at his table are Erika Ishii, they're a voice actor, and Lou Wilson, who is another UCB trained improviser and also has played D&D on a million other podcasts, and Abria Iyengar, who is also a really talented D&D player and storyteller. And it's just like four people telling this really beautiful the like universe it's set in is like it's like loosely inspired by and feels very much like you are in the middle of a Miyazaki movie. So it's just like really beautiful fantasy, but not like Lord of the Rings fantasy. Like there's a little like kind of like cottagecore sort of witch. That's who Erika Ishii plays, who has a talking fox as a familiar. And Lou Wilson plays Ursulon, who is an old friend, they call them, or an honored friend, who is like a bear spirit who's trapped in our world. And Abria plays just a like badass witch wizard person who's was raised at like the Citadel, which is this beautiful magic place where like spells are made alive into people. And it's like sometimes there are episodes where they just go around and like eat at restaurants. Like it's so developed and big. And the sound design, that's why I'm recommending this show. It is so, I know I've talked longer than I have even about Fall Out Boy. The sound design on this podcast is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It has no reason to be as good as it is. It just sounds so freaking good to listen to. And that's Worlds Beyond Number. They have a Patreon where you can listen to them play their characters as children. That's kind of how they developed their characters. And then the free to listen on the free feed is them reconnecting as adults, but they already have this backstory, so it already feels really lived in, and it's really, really, really incredible. Worlds Beyond Number. I just talked so much. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. You were enthusiastic.
It's so good.
We
it's so
support
good.
Random niche interests here on this podcast.
What you got?
I'm going to go kind of mainstream here. People are probably
Conan
already
O'Brien
aware of...
needs a friend.
No Conan O'Brien needs a friend. But I'm going to recommend a little grouping of podcasts within a podcast network. I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but I have brought up the Ringer Podcast Network a number of times. Mm-hmm. For people who like recap shows like ours, who are just interested in pop culture, TV, movies, etc., they just they do it really well. They have a rotating cast of people. There's a couple that I recommend within their overall network. Like I said before, The Watch with Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald. Really specific kind of point of view, but their dynamic is really fun. They're Philly guys. They talk about Philly a lot.
I love that.
Which I thought you might like. So there's that. That's a twice a week podcast. And then the Prestige TV podcast typically covers whatever current sort of prestige level TV is happening. They were on Succession for a while. They're doing Fargo right now. But they also kind of just talk about other things. And the people that they have are just really smart talking about these things. During Yellowjackets, I didn't listen because I didn't want it to influence my own podcasting, but they were covering Yellowjackets. And then sort of related to that, one of the regular people that pops up here and there on the Prestige TV podcast, as well as some of their others, is Van Lathan. He used to work at TMZ. He has a podcast called Higher Learning with Rachel Lindsay from The Bachelor world. I think I told you to listen to them talk about The Bear. I think there was an episode that I sent you that was...
And I think we talked about it on The Watchers for some reason, but it was fantastic.
So Van Lathan, that was an episode he did with someone else from the Rigger Network. I cannot remember who. But I think what I'm kind of recommending is look at this like group of podcasts, and if they're looking at something pop culturally that you're interested in, check it out. And if they're not, maybe check out Higher Learning. They talk about a lot of stuff. They talk about politics. They talk about what's in the news. They talk about hip hop. I just really like his take on stuff. He's extremely thoughtful in the way that he engages with both pop culture and current politics and things like that.
I love that.
Yeah. Big fan.
That's many podcasts, so it's a little bit of
I know. I just stuck in like 4 podcasts in my one. It's more look at the Rigger Podcast Network.
Yeah.
Especially the pop culture stuff, and pick out what is covering what you're interested in.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more. It is not new. It is sort of new to me. It's a podcast that I subscribed to forever ago as one of my I'll check this out eventually, and then didn't. And now they have 150 episodes. So it's called, and this is funny because it is sort of the thing I've been recommending all along, which is kind of a D&D podcast, sort of, or an actual play podcast. I should say not every actual play podcast is using the D&D game mechanics. Some use other games. Doesn't matter. The one I'm going to recommend is called The Film Reroll, and it is it's not a huge podcast, though. I am kind of surprised. And the reason I'm suggesting this one in particular here is the premise for it is they take famous movies and use them as the universe and the game that they're playing, and so they're re-rolling different movies. And I just listened to they just for the holiday did Charlie Brown Thanksgiving.
Oh,
and so they're all playing. Somebody's playing Woodstock, and somebody's playing Snoopy.
That's so cute.
It's so clever because, for that one, you know how much of Snoopy and Woodstock happens in their imagination, like the Red Baron and that kind of thing. So they get bonuses to make things happen in real life in the game if they can imagine a version of it that's to give them special abilities or whatever. That's really specific for that. But they just finished up a run on Galaxy Quest. They've done Clue, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. That was really fun. Hocus Pocus, Mighty Ducks, Last Action Hero, movies that I bet a lot of our listeners love. Aliens. They've done a bunch of the Halloween movies. And then really weirdly specific ones like Memento, but then they've also done and then Ocean's 11, which makes so much sense to do a heist based one in a game like this.
Yeah.
But then also Toy Story and The Princess Bride and just so many movies that I think our listeners probably already love. Practical Magic. I could just read all of, but then also Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. And they're just a really fun group of people. But I think that's a nice in for if you've never listened to an actual play podcast. The Film Reroll is a good way in because it's all topic, or not topic, what's the word I want? The subject matter will be familiar to you. The characters will already be familiar to
Right.
you. It's really fun.
That makes sense.
That's the film reroll.
That makes sense. All right. I think I'm going to do... I was going back and forth between two. I think I'm going to recommend...
Do you want to shout them both out?
No. I'm going to
Okay,
control
okay.
myself.
All right.
Because honestly, these two are... So what I did when I was kind of making this list was I looked through my list of podcasts and I was like, which ones am I the most excited when they come out?
Mm-hmm.
And that I automatically immediately listen to.
Right.
Right? Other than ours.
Of course, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah, that's true for me for Sugar We're Going In and World's Beyond Number right now. They're absolutely like, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, it's like, what are the ones that I'm always like, that's the first thing I'm going to turn on.
Right.
And so those are the ones that I've mentioned so far. I think the one that I'm going to add to that list is, I'm going to recommend Best Friends. With
I love Best Friends.
Nicole Byer and Sashir Sameda.
Yeah. Oh, that podcast is so great.
It's a podcast about nothing. Like, they theoretically give friendship advice to people and they take friendship quizzes, but like, it's really a weekly catch up between two actual best friends that are two of the funniest improvisers that you'll ever hear. And that's what it is. It's like, they end up in the middle of these ridiculous bits somehow. They have a complete and total trust for each other in terms of improvising. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and Nicole is, their relationship is so sweet because Nicole is like full ADHD all over the place, never knows what's happening half the time. And Sashir Sameda is like very grounded, very like, woods hippie. Like, they're a great pair. It really isn't about anything, but it's just a joy to listen to. Their advice is fine. it's
not the point. It's not the point.
No, it's not about that.
Really are such a joy to listen to. I think that trust, like you said, is such a good way to put that. And it's also, they're just two friends who are so in love with each other. It's like, it's so sweet. And you can just tell
they're each other's person.
Yeah. And they just like delight in being together. It's so nice.
There's one that's called, I think actually if you're gonna pick one to start with, I might recommend Nicole Reminds Us That Fish Are Friends, Not Food. There's some of the best moments in this show are when Nicole says something that makes no fucking sense, but it came out of her ADHD brain. And then she spends like 10 minutes trying to figure out where it came from and crying because she's so embarrassed that it's something she said. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah,
it's funny. They'll occasionally do something called besting each other where they'll have two other best friends on and they will quiz each other on their friendship and decide whether they get to stay friends. And actually the one that they got the least right about each other was Amber Ruffin and her sister.
That's really funny. I don't think I listened to that one.
Yeah. So yeah, Best Friends. That's my third recommendation. Anyone that wants more podcast recommendations, just DM us on Instagram. We've got a lot more than that.
So many. Nicole is the reason that I recognize that it might be worth seeking out my own possible ADHD diagnosis. Listen to her talk about it on Why Won't You Date Me in the early days. Was hearing
eye-opening.
Like very genuinely. She's like the first person I could think of who talked about her ADHD in a way that I felt was like, oh, that's what it feels like for me to be in the world. In a way that ADHD isn't always talked about because she's I think we're literally, she's not sure how old she is.
That's true.
But she is a 37-ish year old woman from New Jersey with ADHD. Like come on.
Maplewood.
We don't hold that against her.
Yeah.
But so I have her to thank for weirdly kind of changing my life.
That's incredible. I think before we end this segment, we should just quickly plug, as we have in the past, Beautiful Anonymous, New Jersey is the world.
Of course.
Left of the Dial. the extended family.
Totally.
If you're not on that, New Jersey is the world just put out the most ridiculous Christmas episode that I fucking loved. I mean, the first 5 minutes were geared towards me specifically.
For you in particular? Yeah.
Yeah. But absolute delight. Yeah.
We have a lot of fun over there. We not to get whatever, but we do make that show because we are having fun making it. Just a good thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful Anonymous, if I can plug a little bit
Please.
more. We just started a subscription service, which I know every podcast is doing, I know. But Beautiful Anonymous, if you haven't listened every week for an hour, we open the phone lines, people call in anonymously. I spend a very short amount of time screening people. I'm mostly listening to make sure the audio quality is good and that the person isn't going to be too, this is a little more behind the scenes maybe than I should provide, but I genuinely, the top two important things for me are that your audio quality is good so that our listeners can understand you, and that you don't sound so nervous that I think you're going to panic in the middle and hang up.
And freeze.
Everybody's nervous. So that's not that's not going to stop me from putting somebody through. But once in a while you get somebody where I'm and understandably it's a big, but those are the two big things. People I think they have to have a pitch that is really either salacious or unique, and that's just not that's not my first or second thought at all. And then you talk with Geth anonymously for an hour, and that's what it has been for the last 7 years. And now we've added a component where for a few dollars a month, it's really cheap. I actually don't know off the top of my head. I think it's $5 a month. Unless you sign up for the year, and then it's $4 a month. That's right. And you get an extra, usually ends up being between 20 minutes and a half hour with the caller, just answering random questions that we pulled from our Facebook group. And no bullshit, some of my favorite moments of the last few months of collecting these conversations are in those 5 questions. It's so fun. The one that just went up today, Geth and I both cried. In the extra part. So thank you for letting me shout that out.
Yeah, no, I've been a fan of Beautiful Anonymous since before I knew Chris and before any of the New Jersey's the World
too.
stuff started. I listened to it right when it started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. Same. It is. It's funny that we both started as fans of that podcast, and now here we are. It really is a really unique and special thing that I'm kind of
it is.
It's incredible, and I'm not to get too sappy, but I feel pretty honored that I get to help make it happen now, because there's really nothing else like it. There are things that have tried to be like it since, but it's not. It's just no, it's a really special thing. I still recommend it to people all the time. That's so nice. Me too. And I have to be I know I make it, but I would be I've been recommending it forever before I had anything to do with it at all. So it's great.
Well, I was worried we weren't going to have enough to talk about this week. Thank you to everyone who has stuck with us this year during the extended Yellowjackets break. We will be heading back into the woods pretty soon. Next week.
You've got some time to binge if you haven't watched season 1 and 2.
Yep. And if you watched it a while ago and you want to revisit it, get back on that pilot. One of the best pilots, honestly. I mean, that pilot is what hooked me in the first place.
It's so good. It's so good. I can't wait to talk about it, because we did our little recap for season 1, but it was not. I can't wait. Depth. Please go, if you have been listening to us for the movies and you weren't planning on watching Yellowjackets, please just go watch that pilot and see how you feel.
Yeah.
And then you're going to want to watch the rest of it, because, again, this is not going to be spoiler-free. This is us going in with the full knowledge of season 1 and 2 and revisiting season 1, which I am so excited to do.
Also, this is for my gore-averse friends. I am a gore-averse person. I do not like really gory horror things. The first 5 minutes of this show will make you not want to watch it.
Yeah.
Persevere. It is 100% worth it. As someone who literally has fainted at the sight of blood, it's worth it.
I will say, for a show that, as people know before even going into it, deals in some way, has at least has mentioned the word cannibalism from episode 1.
Yeah.
There are certainly, and I'm not even talking about that, and there's a moment also in the pilot that has nothing to do with cannibalism and is maybe one of the goriest moments of it, but they seem to save it up. It's like there are a few moments throughout the 2 seasons that, like, if you cover your eyes and watch through your fingers, you'll be okay. Yeah. And then the rest of it, it's, I don't know. I don't think it's that it's that bad,
it's
right?
Not nonstop. It's not nonstop.
No.
There's moments. There's certain episodes, certain parts of certain episodes where I have had a hard time, but I love the show, so I just literally like cover my eyes and wait till it's over. But yeah, it's not the main focus of it. It's not about the gore. It's about the people, and the gore is just like an occasional thing that doesn't bother some people, does bother me, but I still watch anyway.
Yeah, it's like how actual play podcasts aren't about the dice. They're about the story.
It's exactly like that. It's exactly
the same thing.
That. Yeah.
Man, a Yellowjackets
D&D.
actual play. Holy that's for the Patreon, folks. When we get to 1 million listeners, I'm going to reach out to the Film Reroll and we're going to do a crossover.
There you go. Sounds good.
So think about who you're going to play, Jodie. Or I guess you could be an OC, an original character, you know?
Yeah.
You could just be Jodie in the woods.
We'll talk about that another time. We'll talk about that
Coach.
next week.
I'm going to be Coach.
We have had this conversation about which ones we are.
We've had who we are.
Yeah.
But who you are and who you play. Sometimes you want to
That's true.
do something that's a little different from who you really are.
That is very true.
All right. Well, we're pushing 3 hours now. We'll see, listeners, how much of this you guys hear.
Yeah. I'm going to go eat now.
So much for listening. We will see you in the woods.
Where do they find us?
At WatchersPodNJ on Instagram, WatchersPodNJ at Gmail. If you have already watched Yellowjackets and you're going to be watching along with us, email us. Let us know what you're interested in talking about. I want to know what people have been obsessing over. Check in with us. And yeah, thank you all so much for hanging out this year. Jodie, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM.
I'm at AQ Andrea EQ.
Also, send us your Container Store purchases.
Yes, please.
And we will see you next week in Jersey.
Bye-bye.